Hello again, welcome back. Today we'll be talking about reading custom files. In the previous tutorial we looked at writing custom file structures and we created a player's text file. This allowed us to create our own custom file structure. We created a computer game with a different character and each had an integer as an ID number, a name, which was a string, and a bank account, which was a double. So we have our data and it's very specific. So basically other programs would not be able to understand what our data is used for, only our program would. Therefore, when we read the data, we have to read it in our own custom way. Firstly, you can't use OFStream. It basically is only for outputting data, like if you want to output text to a file. However, when you want to read data in from a file, you would have to have IFStream. It's simple really, O for output and I for input. So IF allows it to take data from the file and read it into the computer's memory. So basically OF is to write data to a file and IF is to read data from a file. Okay, so create a file object and name it a file. So then there's a constructor. And you can take the name of that file, which was player's text. So you can put the file object on 1 or 2 lines of code. It's basically up to you. You can put it on 1 line or 2 lines. So now we'll be reading the data from the document. That document, if you recall, had information on each row. It had the ID number, the name, and the amount of money. So we'll make variables to put in that data. Int ID. And we'll make string name to store the name. And double money to the amount of money they have. Now we'll create a while loop. And this can loop through each piece of information, like the ID number, name, and the money, and store it in variable. Once we take the data from the files and store it in our program, we can do all sorts, like load the game on the internet, print it on screen, etc. So now, how to do this? Remember, every file has an end of file marker. C++ will basically run this program until it reaches the end of file marker. When it reaches the end, it'll return something called a null pointer. So previously we'd use CIN to get information from the keyboard and store it in variables. Similarly now, we'll get information from the files. So type a file. And the first piece of information comes from there and gets stored in ID. The second gets stored in name, and the third piece of information gets stored in money. So each time it goes through the while loop, it'll look at the file, and each time it gets to a new bit of information, it will store it in ID, name, or money. Now you need to know about the file pointer. This is something you'll need whenever you work with files. The file pointer's job is to keep track of where in the file C++ is working with. The file pointer always starts right at the beginning. The loop will read the first bit of information, so the number 1 you see is what I would like to store in ID. The next piece of information is a name, so the file pointer scrolls to name and sees that Bilko should be stored in name. Then the file pointer goes down the next bit of information and decides that this should be stored in money. This will happen in the first time this program loops through. The next time the program loops through, the file pointer will be here. So that's why we didn't have to change the line of code, as we're working with the same object. And it knows the next piece of information is this too, because the file pointer will be either at the beginning of the next line or end of this line when the program loops through again. So that's how the file pointer works. So we have all the information stored in ID, name and money. Now I can print them on screen. So cout, print ID, then add a comma, then name, and then a comma. And then money, and end line. So it read the file from the text file and did what we asked it to do, which was print out on screen. So this is at the end of the file, and when you run the loop again, it goes to number 2. It runs a whole loop until it reaches the end of the line, then reruns a loop at ID 3 and runs the code. The way the while loop knows when to stop is because it has reached the end of file marker, and C++ already knows that a null pointer has been returned and the loop is false. Now whenever the file reaches the end of the file and it goes to false, this object gets automatically deleted. The deconstructor then closes the file automatically, so we don't need to worry about it. C++ has actually made it very simple to work with files, and if you remember how to do it, you'll be okay. So that's the basic of how to write and read a custom file. And again, your file structures can be different depending on the application. Anyway, thanks again for your time, and see you again next time.